part two of my interview with former senior advisor to President Obama, David Axelrod, we talked about what he hoped to see happen in 2016. Now in part three, our final segment, we talk about racial tensions in places like Baltimore and Ferguson, and why the issue of race in the state of America's inner cities haven't improved more, even under our country's first African-American president.
We're seeing
they
smoke
just set the
coming out.
CVS on fire.
This
the
is
CVS at North Avenue and
Pennsylvania
Avenue. They just set that on fire. And what we were showing you earlier was a car that was stopped by individuals at Fulton and North.
Right.
And they ended up busting out the windshield, busting out the side windows, and
here come the police.
How much do you think the recent events in places like Ferguson and New York and Baltimore could affect the national mood and discussion as we go into 2016?
It's certainly brought into starker focus the fact that that we as Americans don't share the same experiences, and that in the inner cities of this country there are issues and challenges and problems that people sort of had a sense of, but now they're brought into starker relief. I hope we have a national dialogue on this because we need both opportunity in those communities, but we also need security, because a lot of those communities are the ones that are most impacted by violence and crime, and you need an engaged and effective police force in these communities, but they need to be working with the community and not against the community. So we have to find that sweet spot.
It'll be interesting because, I mean, as of right now, I mean, the Republicans on their side have one candidate who's an African American, but as of now, that likely is the only one running. And President Obama was the first black president, and I think a lot of people certainly hoped that race relations and some of these issues would be better. What do you account for how he's not been able to impact the debate, or do you think that he has?
Well, look, I think that there's no panacea for a problem that has torn at the soul of this country since its inception. Mm-hmm. And I think there are genuinely important questions about whether the approaches that we've taken in the past have all been effective. Clearly some of them have not, but that's not a goal we can turn our back on. And so these problems were not going to be solved simply by the election of an African-American president. What the election of an African-American president meant was, though, that in America that there was one less barrier and one more symbol to young people of color in this country that they can aspire. But that in and of itself doesn't mean much if you're living in poverty, if the most successful entrepreneur in the neighborhood is the local drug dealer, if your schools are failing you, if you don't get the parental support that every child needs. These are big, thorny issues, and it'd be great to have a thoughtful discussion about them.
Yeah, and to pick up on one thing you said, we have had a lot of money spent in the past, 50 years on the Great Society that LBJ started. A lot of it targeted trying to eradicate poverty, the war on poverty. We spent over $20 trillion, and you look at the numbers today, and basically roughly the same percentage of people are relying upon government today as they were then. What part would you admit on the left hasn't worked, and what would you like to see change in that debate?
The question is, what does that mean in terms of how you move forward? What are the models that work? You're certainly not going to abandon people who need help, but how do you create opportunity and give people the tools, or help them acquire the tools they need to take advantage of opportunity? And yes, we should acknowledge that everything that's been done in the past hasn't worked, that there are things that haven't worked, and there are things that could be done better, and just because we've done it one way doesn't mean we shouldn't do it another way in the future. But what we can't do is turn our back on the problem and just say, hey, suck it up, because if you don't give people a reasonable chance, suck it up is not a real answer.
No, it's probably not a winning slogan either.
No.
What is it you would like to communicate to? I mean, you wrote a great book, Believer, and it is about your history in the political arena. You've got some great stories. I would encourage anybody who likes just to read about behind the scenes of campaigns and like to take it up because you're a great storyteller. What do people, I started out off by asking what's the biggest misconception people have about you, about President Obama and others. What would you like to tell a more conservative audience about your view on the political scene or about David Axelrod?
I'm someone who believes in the notion that we can organize ourselves together and government and politics as a vehicle to do that, to really impact on the future in a positive way. I honestly get tired of the whole dialogue in Washington about who's, whether the red team's going to win or the blue team's going to win and who's up and who's down. I think this is what frustrates most Americans. But what gets my engine going is having really rigorous discussions about what are obvious challenges and coming to, they may be a synthesis of ideas, but coming to solutions that we can enact together. Understanding that individual initiative and ideas that don't grow out of government are also central to our ability to succeed. But there are things we have to do together. And so I would hope that conservatives would, if they knew me, understand that I'm not dogmatic, and I'm honestly, oddly to say, not all that partisan. But I am someone who believes deeply that we can't just sit back and expect the future. Bobby Kennedy said the future is not a gift, it's an achievement. And I think we have to work together to achieve the kind of future that our kids, and now I have a grandchild, deserves.